Everyone likes noble and discreet company, which inspires confidence and leads to tranquility. Listen, see, and follow the conversations with nobility, and be faithful to the confidence deposited in you.
Thank you, Chris. I'll keep this open in case we would like to revisit after we finish tonight. And we invite everyone to ponder these words and thank our dear Mother, Father, and God for this moment that we have ahead of us. Thank you, dear Lord, for bringing us together once more in this environment of love. Thank you for the environment, this room, these chairs, and everything else that we find in here, especially the air that we breathe, purified, the balsam of love that we contemplate, as all the mentor spirits have done to prepare for us. May this evening be a point of light in our lives. All that we are about to learn, to revisit. May everything that we share be a point of light for us in the future. And as we contemplate this opportunity, we also would like to invite everyone to say our own words, to share our own feelings with one another in a moment of silence. Think of those who could not be here with us tonight, family members, friends, even those whom we still have to adjust some things here and there. Let us ask for those who are in need. Ask for ourselves. Let us practice this beautiful opportunity that we have to talk to our dear Creator. A moment of silence so we can pray. May your guidance be with us and all of those who are on their way, or those who will be watching us through the web tonight and in the future. We thank you, and so be it. As we wait for everybody to adjust, welcome everyone to this 9th session of the book Thought and Life. We're coming almost to an end, but it's never an end, it's a beginning, because we have to put in practice what we have learned thus far, and we have these 3 chapters that we will be working together tonight, and 3 more chapters to come. We haven't decided yet what we will do with the 3 last chapters because they're pretty intense, but perhaps we'll think about that another time. Tonight, we will be talking about tolerance, prayer, and obsession. We would like to say that as much that as we are trying to, thank you, this one is better. Has a bunch of markings. As much as we try to work in these chapters separately, Emmanuel keeps us throwing us back to the older, the chapters that we have studied, and we see that they work together. Much like the natural laws that we study, and we see that they work together, the same thing happens to these chapters. But we would like also to say that, if anything, one of the interesting things that we found studying this chapter is that these 3 chapters in particular, they are type of pill that we can take to avoid problems. If we are already in the problem, we can read it and it can help us. If we're too deep into it, I'm glad that you're here. Because we're talking about tolerance, we're talking about prayer, and we're talking about obsession. It will get a little bit tougher because in the next 3 chapters we'll talk about illness, death, and love. And they do work together, believe it or not. And they are also a consequence, not a consequence, but a continuation to these chapters that we have studied, as we just have mentioned. But they are this active pill that we can read it and help us. So we will work them on these 3 chapters separately, but we want to also kind of bridge them together. And you will see how they make sense towards the end of obsession and when we study obsession. We will not we're not going to go deeper into the idea of prayer. We have a good understanding what prayer is. We'll kind of just brush it off a little bit on the idea what prayer is and what prayer means in Spiritism, as well as what obsession is, because Emmanuel brings a different aspect. As if we are, we go to school and we sit in that chair all the time, and then all of a sudden, the professor, the teacher takes you and puts you in another corner, right? And you see things from a different perspective. You see things differently that perhaps you couldn't see it before. And this is how I felt. Perhaps when I read this, I was like, never thought about on that way. So tolerance. We are in a planet right now that we all need tolerance, right? I want to ask you, just think of someone or a situation that you were involved with that you saw tolerance, or that you felt tolerance, that you felt that you were tolerated. I know this last sentence doesn't go so well, right? When we are tolerated. Some people may think that, wow, I'm being tolerated, right? Or somebody has tolerance towards me. It's strange, but think about it. What does this mean to you? Don't have to answer, it's a rhetorical question, but it's important for us to think about it, right? Perhaps a elderly individual, a grandfather, grandmother, or someone who was wise enough, or someone at work who helped you, or a family member, whoever, someone even on the street who was tolerant enough that perhaps other people would never be as tolerant as that individual. Think about that and bring that to your hearts, because that perhaps can help you later on. So tolerance, that's the first chapter of this session 9. Going to the Learner's Dictionary, and you see here that I didn't go to the Merriam-Webster or whatnot, because tolerance has different meanings and we get confused, and we'll see a little bit on the confusions that we have, because we would like to kind of make note of that as well. But based on the Learner's Dictionary, tolerance is the willingness to accept feelings, habits, or beliefs that are different from your own. Say it again. Tolerance is the willingness to accept feelings, habits, or beliefs that are different from your own. Do we agree with every single thing that is around us? It's tough, isn't it? Look at the title. Look what I did to the title. And this is something just to show, when I put these letters together, every font is different. They're different. They're all different. And some of them are lowercase, some of them are uppercase. It's a small thing. But if I were just to put that out there, and nobody knew that we were talking about tolerance, you would look at it and say, that's strange. But that's a T, that's not C, right? They're different. And believe me, it bugs me, because I like things to be symmetrical, right? the same, and it really catches our eyes.
I was not tolerant to you.
When I put that, when you saw that at first, it worked, didn't it?
What's his problem?
But this is what we're working.
What's his problem?
Because the A is like, well, look at the R. But is it doing its job?
Good, but that's C or T. I said, what
That's a T.
call it?
That's a T. Right? It goes, it's just a, you know, a T. It's a T, I know. But it's doing its job, isn't it? Isn't it? But this is exactly, are you tolerant enough now that I explained? Yaska's like, nah, no, it's still bothering me. It's okay. But this is what we're trying to get to. I'm glad that it's working because it worked for me. When I saw, I was like, let's play with the words here. Let's play with what we know and what we can do with it. And we see this day in and day out in our lives. And what we do, we push it away, right? We treat it not so well because we see these differences in our lives. This is a beautiful, I wish I could make it. Luciana, can you turn off the light? There is a website called tolerance.org. It's a really, really interesting website. It doesn't only talk about tolerance. They take tolerance and they broaden the term of tolerance in different ways. There are booklets that you can read. There are works that you can do to build tolerance. It's really, really interesting. So please explore. It is a guide, yes. So these are paintings that they offer that you can download actually. And over here by Helen Keller, everybody knows who Helen Keller is, okay? The highest result of education is tolerance. It's a little bit distorted. Here on the computer you can see it better. But I wanted to bring this, and we'll see one more picture from the website to kind of illustrate what this idea is, right? So it's education. It's something that you build up. It's something that you have to climb to get there, right? And then Emmanuel comes and says, tolerance is the foundation of all true progress, just as all parts of a machine work together so that there may be production of a certain benefit, so all blessings of nature are a series of manifestations of this blessed virtue that inspires true brotherhood. So it's everywhere. It's everywhere. We see the trees dealing with the environment. We can take in consideration a bamboo tree, right? How it moves and it never breaks, right? With the wind, with the harsh weather. We see the different variations of trees that, you know, that just live in the element, and the animals as well. And everything follows a pattern. Everything follows as obedient as possible to the environment. Thank you. And how how they evolve as well, and how we evolve. But now that we have our choices and ways to change things, we tend to manipulate. But we'll see a little bit more of that later on. Irina Bokova is a Bulgarian politician, and she was the Director General of UNESCO from 2009 to 2017. And she said something really interesting on the International Day for Elimination of Racial Discrimination. And this is a document that is actually online, anybody can pull as well, that she wrote this. Respect and tolerance are liberating acts whereby the differences of others are recognized as the same as our own, and whereby the riches of another culture are taken as the wealth of all. So this person is different, I'm different. We take those differences, and that's what we make it, the environment more rich, right? That's how we make the environment more rich. And this is another picture again. Imitated, excuse me. And these are just a bunch of little faces singing or playing something. So it's really interesting how they come with these pictures, trying to bring this idea of tolerance, bringing people together in whatever difference we have. So it's just something that we want to emphasize again, because it will lead us to what we will be seeing with prayer and obsession. And perhaps in the next session, illness as well. And then Emmanuel comes back, we're bringing Emmanuel back to say, tolerance, however, is not a superficial concept. It is a living reflection of understanding that is born purely in the spring of the soul, generating hope, patience, and forgiveness, with forgetfulness of all evil. We would like to emphasize this, put emphasis on these, on this phrase over here. But before we go into it, look what he says. It's a living reflection of understanding. Anybody remember what chapter was understanding? Ah, 10. Thank you, Kirsten. Good. Should have get a book. Well, think about that. Thank you. But it is chapter 10, yes. And we would like to revisit very fast, because if we don't bridge these things together, we get lost. Because what is understanding? What is understanding in this evolutionary path that we're going through right now? He reminds us of the farmer. The farmer cannot furrow his fields without a plow. A sculptor uses a chisel to bring out his creative ideals hidden within the marble. Likewise, to produce protective mental reflexes, we need understanding as a foundation for the task of our renewal. An understanding that symbolizes dynamic brotherhood, a feeling that is like a magnet in which our best attracts the best in others. We can begin by distinguishing the criminal from the crime, just as the farmer sees the difference between the worm and the soil, so that he can lessen the strength of the former and enhance the usefulness of the latter. And just as the farmer works to eliminate all blights to save his crop, so must our understanding find the means to help our neighbor who falls into crime. But let's go back to what we saw here. So we see that with this idea, we have somebody who is working with tools, time, dedication, right, to change something, to change a very rough stone into something. We see a farmer who has to get up early to do whatever he has to do, deal with the weather. It's too much rain, what should I do? Too much sun, what should I do? All of this takes care, takes a lot of patience, right? And we see Emmanuel then bringing back this idea of tolerance to illustrate, to bring light into our lives. That is born purely in the spring of soul, generating hope, patience, and forgiveness. It's not patience. Tolerance is not patience. This is one of the things that we also would like to remind everyone, because when we Google the idea of tolerance, when we're trying to study, we're trying to go deeper into it, we think that tolerance is patience. They're different things. Patience is more the feeling that you can wait for something without losing your cool, right? You're waiting in line to get to, to something at the airport or something, and you're okay. You know that you're going to get there. You're fine. But some people, they don't have that patience. Tolerance is when you know that something's not going to change. As much as you work on it, perhaps it's not going to change. But it brings this idea of patience, right? That you're tolerant, but you're also patient, that something's going to happen, and you're hopeful, but it's not just that you're sitting down and, okay, I'm just going to wait. You're working, right? You're producing, right? You know that something's going to come out of it. How do we get this to this point? It's pretty tough in our daily lives. There is one element that, as I was analyzing this, that helps us a whole lot. Especially us, Spiritists. The next life. We know that we bring a lot from the past lives, right? That's why I am who I am, how I am, right? But I know, and we all know, that we're not going to get stuck in the same place. It may take 1 or 2 or 3 more reincarnations for me to change certain aspects of life, but it's going to change because we all follow one variable that we cannot hide it from it, the law of progress. So with that in mind, it brings these elements together, right? The idea of patience, the idea of hope, and We need something else. It's like we're cooking something, right? Forgiveness with forgetfulness of all evil. Forgiveness with the forgetfulness. Because I can easily say, and we'll see this a little bit more, I can easily say, I forgive you, but I still bring into my memories what was done. I still carry that load with me that we have studied here over and over and over, of all the things that this individual, that the world is doing against me, right? And I'm just an individual living in the world. And we carry these burdens with us. So let us try to digest this as we go through. Towards the end of the chapter, we'll see more this idea of forgetfulness of all evil. But we need these elements. We're working on these elements now. One of the things that we also want to highlight, guilt. Remember when we study guilt? Let me go back to Kirsten. Kirsten, which one was that one? Oh, I don't remember. So, no, guilt was recently. Chapter 22. We develop feelings of guilt whenever we avoid fulfilling our duty. This then leads to various shades of remorse that thereby activates an infiltration of darkness within the delicate tissue of our soul. We don't do what we're supposed to do, and then we create this guilt, and then we come back. But when we come back, instead of us doing what we're supposed to do again, we don't. We perhaps can do even worse. We tolerate, but this tolerance is different. We let things go, we let things be the way they want to be, and we don't help. An example that we bring back again is in the book Action and Reaction, and I say this again because it's the best way to understand this idea of guilt and this idea of tolerance, going towards the wrong way, not being active. The mother, for example, that had a son, and she didn't pay attention to the ways, or let's say she paid attention, but she didn't correct it, right? The way that she was supposed to do as a mother, the way her son was behaving. When they discarnate, he discarnated in a very, let's say, precarious way. And so did she. And she, in the Mansão Paz, is asking for a new opportunity to reincarnate and help that son again, right? Sometimes we look at this idea of a parent and I'm not judging the way parents are, or an individual towards another being tolerant, but they're not correcting. They're not trying to help with good examples. They let anybody do whatever they want. They let, this situation to go this way or to go that way. Or sometimes we expect as well other people to tolerate us without hearing, okay, why don't you try to do this way? Because this is not working, right? So we want to bring this parenthesis, if we will, on this idea of tolerance, because tolerance is not something that we're just, as we saw, that we sit and we wait, or we let the world do whatever they want to do. It's not forcing anyone, and we're going to see this, but it's not letting the world do whatever they want to do. To insist that others think as we do would be to demand that the world adapt itself to our whims. Our obligation is to adapt ourselves with dignity to the world, with the firm purpose of helping it. This right here, if you guys forget anything about this evening, should be the aim of this talk tonight. When we try to think, or when we think that others, or we force others to do or to think the same way we live our lives, forget it. You're selling yourself to failure. So it's important that we change this ideal. It's important that we see things differently. We see the difference, and perhaps we know that we can help somehow, or to bring some kind of improvement on that person's life or into that group's life, right? But we do it how? By example. It's not forcing. The worst thing is when we hear, you have to do this. Well, some of us may be okay, but it's a little better when you hear, you ought to do this, or can I show you how to do this in a different way? Or maybe if you try to do this way, this will bring you different results, right? trying to bring that individual or that group of people to be visionaries. And we don't have this in the world nowadays. This is one of the things that we're lacking, right? This understanding, this tolerance to firmly have this purpose to make a change without imposing. Divine providence reflects wise and active tolerance everywhere. God does not require that the seed immediately produce after its kind. God gave it time to germinate and grow, to bloom and bear fruit. God does not ask the stream to quickly blend its course towards the awaiting ocean. He offers a stream pathways through the soil and the time needed to finish its course. We see this again, and Emmanuel brings this. It's in nature. It's in our nature. Our bodies, our physiology is the same way. Everything has its time, right? Everything has its time. We are already in a position that we can change certain things, right? When we have to speed up our metabolism. We know that there are certain foods that helps us with certain things in our bodies, in our physiology. But everything, too much of everything, perhaps bring other issues as well. So just an attention that, a little more attention, paying more attention to these elements can help us as well. Likewise, tolerance is needed between one soul and another. It is important that we do not assume any attitude of violence. The roughness of an impulsive person, the irritation of the uneducated patient, the claw of an animal, the thorns of a rose, all represent the natural signs of evolutionary stage in which we are found. How can we change this? How can we change this? Another element that we would like to bring in the book, in the Spirit's book, question 742, what is the cause that leads humankind to war? The predominance of animal nature over their spiritual and the satisfaction of their passions. We're not going to go over into the whole answer, but it's this barbaric ideals that these individuals still have, and they cultivate war. But what is war? It's just somebody in one country carrying a gun and running after other people and shooting other people. What about the war within ourselves? I want to do this. My body is demanding, right? The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, right? And we're not tolerant with ourselves because we want to make the change overnight. And what we do? We suppress, we fight, right? Or we do other things, right? Like the individual who is saying is being tolerant, but is really pushing ourselves to other issues in the future, and we compensate with something that is perhaps even more negative. We can see this with food, we can see this with drinking, we can see this with certain behaviors, right, that we still have and we can change because we want to do things overnight. We want to climb Mount Everest before we can even walk a mile. So it's important that we start changing this idea of tolerance so that we don't create these wars within ourselves. So that when we watch the news, right, the elections, especially Brazilians now, listening to the elections and following the elections, you don't get upset. You don't engage into wars, right? You create a point of view, you have a point of view, but you don't engage into wars. You're calm, you're serene, and this again goes to everybody. Do not, again, engage in this idea of not having this tolerance between one another. Here are some tips. We're not going to bring all of the text that Emmanuel brings in this chapter, but we're kind of summarizing to tips because I believe this is what he's trying to bring to us. Do not fight hatred with hatred, as we just mentioned. Do not retaliate with poison. Tolerate. When we see something that is adverse, like that tolerance at the beginning, that title, what do? We try to understand what happened. Well, maybe the person was not paying attention. What was the situation that the person was not paying attention? What caused that situation, right? Will it happen again so I can help, so I can prevent? And here we are, right, trying to get deeper and deeper into the root cause of the problem so we can help somehow. And if I cannot help, we jump to the next chapter. Let us pray. This idea of asking the what, the why, the how, before we even say something. Because as Emmanuel said, it's to be active. It's not to sit down and say, oh, let us pray. No, let's be active. Knowing sometimes perhaps can even help us praying for the situation to be more effective in the help of that individual. Treat ignorance with love as you would treat a wound. If you hit something, right? Do you go in there and slap it? Right? We have this, joke with kids, right? Something happens, you go, no, don't do that to the kid anymore, right? Bad, it's bad. We don't do that. You try to, analyze and see where it's hurting, and you put something on it, and you take preventive medicine or something that will help you with the wound or whatever it is, and you give some time. You have to be patient, right? You are hopeful that perhaps tomorrow, after you take those measures, you will feel better. Everybody around you wants you to feel better as well. You see the change, and why can't we apply tolerance in the same way to the wounds of our lives? I know, it's not easy. Tolerance is the forgetfulness of all evil and the continuous service in goodness. This is perhaps as we engage more into the idea of tolerance being a calling for this idea of forgiveness. And I think it's the hardest part, because we hold these grudges for a long time. What can we do? We'll see. Do not forgive just verbally, because if we just say it and we don't do anything, here's what happens. Emmanuel brings this in a very eloquent way, and we would like to bring and share with you that to forgive is to let go of all shadows and follow the light. It does not mean to fall to one's knees or to ascend the towers of false superiority by making a show of our heart's desires. Rather, it is to persist in the work of regeneration by bringing about good and harmony. In doing so, those who do not understand us yet will observe us differently and finally understand the silent language of our example. Here's the key, that if you say it once, if you say it twice, 3 times, and nobody's following you, just keep working. At the end, we'll see Christ, as Emmanuel brings Christ again as an example, the same thing happened to him. Remember that who were those who followed him at first? Say, okay, this guy is right. Let's do what he's saying. They questioned. Did he stop working? No. They denied him. Did he stop working? No. He kept going. He kept going. And at the end, there's something really interesting that Emmanuel brings. But this idea of working and keep working, because we often lose our focus. We lose our purpose. And I think the purpose here is a key word for this idea of changing and forgiving. Because when somebody does something against us or creates a disharmony in the environment, we often pay attention to that issue and we forget our purpose. I never forget, there was this Brazilian, I forget his name now. He was running a marathon. I can't remember what Olympics it was. And as he was running, this guy comes, and I think the guy was actually dressed on a clown thing too, costume, and pushes the guy. and you imagine, you're running, and you actually, and somebody comes and just pushes you against the rail, whatever. It's like, what happened? For you to get up and keep going, it's like, it takes effort. It's like, what just happened? Somebody pushed me. You would never think that somebody would do such a thing. And sometimes it's exactly what happens in our lives. We are going 100 miles an hour, right? And then somebody comes and cuts you off. Or pushes you to the side of the road. Or does something that it's for you to get up and brush it off, it takes energy, right? But that's what Emmanuel is calling us, to keep going. If you have a set goal, do it and keep going, because chances are something's going to happen to put us to the side of the world. Christ offers us a pattern of ideal tolerance when he returned from the grave to encounter his discouraged students. He did not address Peter's abandon or Judas' weakness to say that he forgave them. Rather, he spoke about the redemptive task ahead, thereby inducing them to resume their work in the field of goodness. Imagine the waste of time that would be. Really, Peter? You did this to me? Really? Imagine the conversation that we would actually carry before we even think about, oh, guys, look, there's work to do. There's stuff that we have to do that more people will follow us. 100 years from now, people will need this message, so you need to go. No. He just kept going. He didn't even say, look, this is how it's going to happen. He said, there's more work to do. Love one another. That was a work in itself, right? Love one another. And keep going. To tolerate is to reflect brotherly understanding, and forgiveness is always a preventive measure that assures health and peace, renewal and security wherever it may be. So remember these words, because if we don't work with this in this idea of tolerance, tolerating ourselves, tolerating the environment, tolerating where we are, everything, again, pushes us to this idea of tolerance. Things may get a little bit harder, and we know that. If we don't analyze this idea, if we don't work on it, things will get worse. When we go to work and something happens at work that we don't feel well, or we have something, a discord with somebody, what tends to happen towards the end of the day? We have a headache, a stomach ache, something happened, right? And you carry that over and over and over for days, right? What if you were to say, let me tolerate, let me take a step out of the situation, and how can I tolerate, how can I continue my work, help this other individual to continue his or her work as well, and live a better life? Perhaps you will have a headache because you have to think. Perhaps you will feel the discomfort, but you're not going to carry that for too long. So let's keep this in mind, because we don't want to get to the third chapter that we're going to be discussing tonight. And this is, if you cannot do it, if it doesn't happen, let us pray. Let us pray together. And this is why I said at the beginning that these three chapters, they work together. Emmanuel brings the following. Prayer is a divine journey of the mirror of soul, aiming towards the higher realm in order to reflect its greatness. So when we say, for example, the Lord's Prayer, does anybody remember? How do you start? Huh? Who art in heaven, right? Have we ever really paid attention to the significance of these words? We're at home right now studying the Our Father book by May. And even though it's a book for children, and I consider myself one, I don't think we have here. I know Yasko is looking for it. I don't think we have it here. Do we? Yeah, we do. Okay, Our Father, here. Yay. Thank you. Right here. This beautiful thing here. Please study. Please study. The stories that she brings are very much for kids. But when you read it, the amount of information that she brings to us, it's amazing. And she emphasizes on this ability that we have to say, Our Father who art in heaven. This connection that we have, that I don't care what's happening around me right now, I'm going to say that and I'm going to connect with God, the Creator, our Father, right? Which is completely different from the idea that we had years and years ago that God was this punishing being, right? That if I do something wrong, He's going to, put me on timeout. No, God wants me to be happy. And she goes on and on and on and on. And Emmanuel brings this idea of us, the mirror of life, right? Us, reflecting this light, allowing ourselves to receive this light and to shine back wherever we may be looking at it. Or if I'm always in prayer and I deal with you folks, guess what? You feel it. That's why we feel good when we come to the center. That's why we feel good when we go to perhaps a church, when we go to a house that people in the house they pray. It's this light enlightenment that is being exchanged, right? Prayer is like a live appeal to the powers of the heavenly spirit. This appeal may be clothed without words, in the silent language of the vibrations of the soul. And this is how we're going to focus right now. Into words, yes, but mainly on how we vibrate. And we have spoken about it here at the Spiritist Center, not only into our sessions, but also in the study of the Spirit's book. That is not just to sit there and say words. It's much more than that. And we will see that Emmanuel goes even beyond what we were thinking, or at least that I have studied before, when we think about prayer, right? Imagine a mirror turned towards the sun to reflect its brightness into a dark pit, right? When we were kids, we all played with mirrors, right? We all played with, taking the mirror and shining the light someplace else. And it's the same thing. Imagine if we could do the same thing with a mirror, but it's prayer. When we take it and we direct it someplace else that perhaps need help. The shine the light is shining on my mirror, and I'm directing to that individual as I connect with God and connect with that individual or situation as well, right? There are varying degrees of prayer which begin from the simplest desire of the lowest beings up to those of divinely exalted angels, or spirits, or guides, or mentors, whatever we want to call it. Nothing is done on earth without the desire of an aspiration that guides the steps of all creatures. So everything connects. There is a connection. There is prayer between all these individuals in the lowest orders as well as in the highest orders. And we'll see a little bit more about it. But as we learn with Spiritism, what is prayer? We are immersed in the universal cosmic fluid, right? We are, again, imagine, we like to bring this example because it's easier for us to think. Imagine if we were all in a pool right now. For those who like water, great. For those who do not like water and are afraid of water, just bear with me. Nobody's going to drown. But imagine if we were in a pool, right? And the pool is quiet. Everybody's quiet. But if I start splashing, right, and throwing water everywhere, what's going to happen? We'll feel the ripple effects, right? You start moving as well. The same way, in the same manner that I start moving myself too. If I make sudden moves, you will feel that sudden move too, right? However, if I move slowly, you will start moving kind of slowly too. So it's the same thing with the universal cosmic fluid. Exactly the same thing. So as I, with my mind, change the environment, the universal cosmic fluid, you will feel it. If I have negative thoughts, difficult thoughts, if I'm having a bad day and you come and talk to me, guess what? You will feel the ripple effects. But if we're in prayer, if we're reflecting about something that we have to do, it could be work, it could be anything, you will feel the same ripple effects. This is how we like to help one another when people come to us and they ask how we see prayer in the Spiritist Center, in the Spiritist arena. But this is just for us to recap a little bit this idea, this exchange of thought, and how we manipulate universal cosmic fluid. Emmanuel is now bringing to us something very different. Throughout the planet, prayer is the motion that sustains the cosmic tapestry. In the oceans, the ebb and flow of tides perpetuate their own equilibrium. In the planet world, it is the yearning to reach the light, to assimilate its elements. In the animal kingdom, it is the instinct of curiosity and inquiry that mark the basic sign of reason and in men, it is his natural concentration before any useful enterprise along the human path. This changes everything. How? Because we think that prayer is when we kneel, when we sit down, when we put our hands together, right? But what Emmanuel is saying is that in nature, all throughout, everything that is doing corresponding to the universe as it's being built, as it is being developed, and us, when we concentrate into something positive, we are in prayer. So when you're getting up in the morning and you're preparing yourself, taking a shower, brushing your teeth to go to work and do something useful, guess what? You're praying. You're praying. You don't have to have a religion. You don't have to have a belief. You are doing what you're supposed to do. Because hopefully, the money that you're making at work, you put into good use to help someone, to help progress, to help the economy as well. It's a completely different view of what we think this idea of prayer. I'm just sitting here, and it's important that we do as well. Jesus himself taught us that we need to exclude ourselves, have our own time. We're still developing. We still have a very immature way to understand what the Creator is. So it's nice to have these moments, intimate moments, right, that we have with our Creator, to say, okay, how is this really? Or even when we have our doubts, when we have to say something. But Emmanuel is bringing us a different view of this whole thing. When the professor plans his lesson and the physician concentrates on a remedy for a certain ailment, when an administrator devises a program to carry out a task, and the engineer works attentively on the blueprints for a certain project, in fact, all are using a form of prayer. They are reflecting on their mental screen from their past education, the science of healing, legislation, and the progress that flows from the invisible plane with abstract images before manifesting to the world. So, mathematics. Is it something that comes from God? It is. Medicine. Engineers. Because we tend to separate these things. We tend to, put science over here and religion. When I say religion, again, it's not the religion that we understand, but the connection, perhaps. I shouldn't even say religion, but the connection with our Creator, completely separate. And then we separate in titling religion and put aside. This is completely different than this. Is it wrong for us to perhaps before we go and take a test or we go do something at work to say, let me say a prayer. Let me go, if people around me won't understand what I'm doing, I'll go to a specific room, perhaps close the door, pray. It's not that we're going to be in prayer for half an hour because we're on the clock. We cannot do that. But it's okay. We're preparing to do something useful. Remember that. To pray is to align oneself with the greatest source of power in the universe, to observe its riches, and to reflect the laws of permanent renewal that govern the foundation of life. To continue, we wanted to bring all these passages because it's really important, and I think it illustrates and really emphasizes on this idea that Emmanuel is bringing to us, that prayer gives us a spark to the hidden energy of the heart and releases them by the living and image forming power of thought. In turn, these images ascend to the higher sphere, touching the minds of both visible and invisible entities around us. As a result of this contact, we will receive answers from the divine plane, for the all-merciful Father manifests himself through his children who express his divine goodness. It's not a materialization of God or a specific being, but these prayers, these connections are everywhere in our lives. We just have to be open for it. Because sometimes we want a miracle to happen, right? For whatever we're asking to happen like that, it's not going to happen. Perhaps it will be somebody who will be knocking on your door, and why don't you try to analyze this differently? Or a situation that you are facing now, well, after you pray, you start facing it, that is say, you know what, this is pushing me somewhere, perhaps that I don't like too much, but maybe this is the way that I have to go, And it's a result of the prayer that you have said perhaps days and days ago. When a person turns to prayer, they touch responsive hearts. Such contact produces reflexes of alignment. Through them, the spirit silently receives the influx of the divine messengers in the form of inspiration and inner help. These are the sublime servants who assist with the soul's evolution, renewing emotions and thoughts through which it perfects the existence. Our mentors, guys. Those who prays for us as well. Remember, when we go through a reincarnatory plan, perhaps there are others who didn't reincarnate with us, right? Love spirits, love mentors that want us to do well. And we have all of these individuals praying that we do well, wishing us well. And what we do? We focus on the negative. Just as when we were talking about tolerance, we tend to focus on the negative. We tend to focus on the old ways of our lives, and we don't even open ourselves to pray. So it's important for us to open to this element of our lives. The process of prayer is the highest means of interchange between earth and heaven. Remember, we're these mirrors, right? The mirror of life that we have been studying through these sessions. And what do we want to reflect? Ask yourself that question. What do you want to reflect? The negative that is around us, what we see on Facebook, what we see on the news, the difficulties that we see in life? No, we want to reflect something better. And for that, we have to prepare ourselves. When we say, "Thy kingdom come," right, with the Lord's Prayer, it's not that I'm going to sit here and wait. We have to work. When it's "Thy kingdom come," we have to prepare ourselves. We have to get up early. We have to do what we have to do. We have to face the difficulties of the world, right? And the kingdom will come. It's already with us. We just don't see it.
Obsession.
Thy light come. See? Obsession. Obsession. It's a long... Let's take a step back, as I should have actually prepared everybody. It's a long, a topic that we don't like to talk too much, a little long, if we make it long. But we wanted to go ahead and, again, look obsession from a different angle, okay? If we don't have the tolerance, if we don't know how to pray, if we don't know the effectiveness of prayer and the wonders that can do in our lives, if we go back to, for example, the Medium's book, I believe it's chapter 23 of the second part, when Kardec talks about obsession. And one of the things that Kardec is very adamant about, the best way to free ourselves from obsession is through prayer. Right? The only way that you can detach one from the other is through prayer. And we're going to see this over and over again. Obsession. Obsession is regarded as attunement, not obsession. I'm sorry. This is not obsession. This is actually mediumship. I'm sorry. I will make this correction here. And it should be as... Oops. All right. I have to make some correct. As mediumship is regarded as attunement, obsession is the balance of inferior forces portraying each other. Remember, we're talking about, should have separated this, we're talking about the mirror of life, our minds, right? So when we are discussing here, when we're learning about mediumship, it's this connection. It's the same as Chris picking up his phone and let me call Leo. Let's see how's the weather over in Westminster, right? And we talk about, there's this attunement, right? There's this connection, right? Here, Emmanuel is trying to bring to us that obsession, it's us picking up our mirrors and showing, and I'm saying, look, this is who you are. And then Chris is taking his mirror and showing to me who I am. And we're battling, right? And we're portraying what the worst of me into him, and he's portraying the worst of him into me, right? So we're in this constant battle, and it's like a tug war, right? We're just fighting with one another because I want him to be this way and he wants me to be this way. He's responding to my ideas, I'm responding to his, so on and so forth. So it's this constant exchange of inferior forces. And he continues by saying, obsession, therefore, is an authentic phenomenon of interaction. It does not proceed only from the so-called dead to the so-called living. Essentially, it often occurs between incarnate spirits who overpower one another by means of invisible threads of suggestion. And this is one of the things that we would like to focus over here. In the, again, in the Gospel according to Spiritism, not Gospel according to Spiritism, excuse me, in the Medium's book, the Genesis as well, we will learn a little bit more about the influence of a spirit onto another. And we put aside if the spirit is incarnated or not, right? We just put that as idea on the side. Let's just two spirits influencing one another. There are levels of obsession, right? This influence, this constant influence over the other. Fascination, right? Which is this very low-key type of influence. You know, so-and-so do this, and the individual goes and does, right? So-and-so do that, and the individual does. It's the same thing, right? And we think that we're doing the right things. And it's very easy for you to get out of it once somebody comes to you and say, well, Leo, try to do this a little bit different. Through prayer, we can go and rescue that situation, right? And then we have the other one. Does anybody know the second one? Fascination. Subjugation. What is subjugation? It's a little bit more tougher. It's a little bit more acute, if we can say. Right now, it's the individual who is being commanded is there, right? I'm receiving orders, and guess what? I'm right. I'm not going to change my ways. That's how we see intolerance, right? That you are who you are, and I'm not going to change. Or I am who I am, I'm not going to change, right? It's my way or the highway, right? But there's a third one as well. That is, things are much, 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 much harder, right? Is when the individual has no power over himself because there is a spirit influence that individual, that spirit. And I keep going back and forth in spirit. We're all spirits. We're all in the physical body. But this obsession can go as far as a spirit towards an incarnated spirit, a spirit over a spirit, or vice versa. Or, as we don't talk too much about it, you and I. And I'm putting our friends who are out of the physical body now, right? Don't we do that? Don't we force people to do the things that we want them to do or to be the way we want them to be, as we saw when somebody's being intolerant? Isn't that obsession or not? When we want a whole society or group of people to follow my way, right? Or I want the whole Congress to think the way I think, because that's going to really help me on my needs. But what about the needs of the whole country? So we have to change our ways. When we study about being tolerant and to work for the good of all, it's for the good of all. It's not just mine, because I'm not alone. In order for one mind to address another and make itself felt and understood, this is how it happens, by the way. It creates images, and this precludes the need for words or action. Through the principle of repetition, a mind reaches its objective by projecting to the mind it wants to control. If the receiving mind is in attunement with the one seeking to control it, an active circuit is then formed. Later on, words and actions become a part of the process to consolidate the exchange. Thus, the condition of being, spellbound, is established. The obsessor and the obsessed begin to live and react reciprocally upon one another. It starts very subtle, just words, small actions, and we start following the same idea, the same patterns, because we're reflecting, right? Let's go back to the pool. You're just there, right? Not doing anything. And sometimes you want to get out of the pool, but you think, oh, no, stay here. It's going to change. No, or we don't say anything. Leo, stop splashing the water. We're trying to be quiet over here. So that's the idea. Obsession, therefore, are not unilateral. What are we trying to say? It's a partnership right there. When we think that, oh, I'm being obsessed, I think that I have spirits that are trying to obsess me, or I think I have people who are trying to obsess me, or do something against me. Well, what are you doing? Are you shaking hands with that situation? Yes, I understand that sometimes we are not in control and people can do whatever they want. But am I connecting with that situation? Or am I saying, wait a minute, you can do whatever you want, but it's not going to reach me, right? It's like somebody trying to give you something that is rotten, a fruit that is not good anymore. Are you going to eat it? You're going to take it? No. Here, look, this is not good. I don't want it. Keep it to yourself. It's the same thing. So it's a partnership. Think of this, that obsession is a partnership. So if somebody say, oh, you know, poor me, I'm going through this. Well, we opened the door somehow. We did something that allowed that individual to come and knock on our door. You often joke at home that if we put a sign at our door, at our driveway, we'll have a party here so and date. Guess what? They will come. Not necessarily we put the sign when somebody's knocking on our door to do something against us, right? But our behaviors is emitting all these signs. Leo's doing this, Leo's doing that. Leo's omitting this, right? Or hiding this. So we have to be careful. All such situations are a process of reciprocal interchange. And the longer and steadier the lower images are entertained between two spirits, the stronger the obsession. Both agents stray further, from their reality to enter a lower atmosphere of exchange where they surrender to a sort of mutual fascination. There is a similarity here to that of a stone being carved. The more the chisel cuts into the groove, the deeper the marks, thus giving the image sharper and more enduring details. Another comparison can be made to a phonographic record, a vinyl. Remember, this book was written back in the 50s, so Emmanuel had to use an example that was according to that time. So a vinyl, whose audible sounds are registered in the grooves for later playback. A mind obsessed is similar to this. It registers the orders and the prompting of the orders and prompting of the obsessor, especially during sleep when our reflexes are less under control. An obsessed person obeys almost automatically such orders and promptings, just like a passive magnetized instrument, as they carry out these post-hypnotic suggestions. The more we surrender to a certain idea, the more we become converted to it and then manifested outwardly. One thing that we would like to remind everyone: during the sleep, pray before you go to sleep. It's not to be afraid. Be jovial before you go to sleep. Think of things that will make you happy, that will connect with higher minds. Remind yourself of the things that you could have done better, yes, because this will help us during the sleep as well in the next day. But remind ourselves of good things that you have accomplished. Be tolerant to yourself. Because the worst thing that we can do is that before we go to sleep, we're thinking about this or that, and we're saying things to the neighbor, or think of things that neighbor that did against me, and here I am, about to go to sleep, where now there is a temporary disconnection of the physical body, and the influence, it's much easier. The connection of thoughts, the exchange of thoughts, it's very fast. And they come full force against us. As much as somebody would come full force against us when they don't like us. It's the same thing. It's not that we are bringing negative thoughts to anybody, but to being proactive. Truly being proactive. This is not something that we can run from it, because as we learned in past chapters, the exchange of information is constant. I can't control what Yasko is thinking right now. What Daniel is doing back there, I can't control. And quite certainly, he cannot control what I'm thinking right now. And that goes for everyone. That alone, that idea alone, if you don't think this way, please allow me to explain myself and amaze you as well. That alone brings us really close to God. When we analyze that we are something different, to bring it to a lower level, right, than everybody else, it's like, wow. Our identity, who we are, right? It's completely different of who everyone is. And that alone brings us back to God, because there's got to be a creator for all of this. And when I think of that individuality, that identity that sometimes we lose because we are being obsessed, because we're being controlled by someone else or by a situation, we need to fight. We need to work. It's not that we're not going to be intolerant, because perhaps if there is an obsession, if there is something pending from the past, it's because there was a contract established in the past. And we need to undo that contract. Or perhaps create a new contract so that one is really broken to pieces. Because when we think that obsession is a contract, what about the other side? If we break that contract, right, they're going to be upset. So then we also need to reestablish life, reestablish the environment with that individual as well, by praying for that individual, by asking that the other side also find a way to reconcile with you. If they don't want to, it's a choice, right? But we need to do our part. Because we often think that obsession is, you go to the Spiritist Center, you receive the passes, you're done. The other spirits are taken someplace else and nothing happens. It's put into a box. Now, we will see also in the Genesis that one of the elements of this obsession, right, or a treatment done in a Spiritist Center is that the other spirit, right, is not thrown someplace in a vault. No, it's also treated. They are rescued because they are an individuality just as we are. And this is the justice that we study here. This is the love of God that sometimes we take into whatever we want to put it, right? So there's got to be a rescue, a mutual rescue. If it's a bilateral contract, there's got to be a bilateral rescue too. This explains how strange disturbances begin to take place that often appear in the form of illnesses or depressive conditions, afflictions, or insanity. These states can also lead to cruel deeds and death. We have joked about this here at the Spiritist Center. I'm going to make a pause of something. The worst thing is when we go home, and this is an example of life, okay? This is an example of life. We go home sometimes after a full day of work, and we don't stop. And we don't give ourselves a break. What am I trying to say? We take, for example, the cold that we have to face when we change seasons, right? And we see people sick. I deal with the public all the time. And one of the things that I try to do is to wash my hand all the time, is to avoid eating things in between the interactions. Not that I'm being germophobic, because I talk to everybody, I hug everybody, I don't have that problem. But it is how we take things in life. We can't control what others are doing, but we can control ourselves. We can try to at least perfect ourselves, right? So when you go home, take a shower. When you get home that you have a really difficult day, go and take a shower. Stop everything, go take a shower. Let the water cleanse the physical body. And start thinking and start praying as well while you're taking a shower. So that the headache may not be as acute as it would be if you don't stop, if you don't give yourself a break. The shower here can be a moment that you stop and listen to a music also, right? Or that you stop and read a good passage of a book, drink some coffee, drink some water, whatever you wanted to do, but give yourself a break, that you detach yourself completely. Because some illnesses, it's like, oh, everybody is cold right now. Everybody has a cold. Well, everybody is not including me. Doesn't have to include me, right? So I think this is something that we need to remind ourselves, because when you hear these ideas of getting sick, oh, I hear this, everybody's doing, everybody's saying, obsession, right? Every case of obsession begins as a sketch vaguely drawn by someone else's thought that shows on the screen of our mind. It begins as a mere speck, then it becomes a visible line. Much later is a fully defined, sharply etched picture from which we receive unfortunate demands that imprison us in the ways of darkness. It is imperative that we learn to avoid idleness, for the idle mirror of our shadowy life may become addicted to that state and detained by the power of evil. Subsequently, we will become subjugated by evil extortionists who spread their diabolical nets of misery and crime. Get your mirror moving. Move, exercise, right? And this is, we say it over and over and over. We always have to learn new things. We always have to read new perspectives, new ideals to get us moving. If you're doing something for 5 years now that you have created a habit, try to change a little bit. Try to perfect a little bit. Try to develop new habits, right? To finalize, folks, I wanted to bring these two ends of this chapter of obsession, as well as the final phrase that Emmanuel brings on the chapter, the prayer chapter. He said on the prayer chapter, through the divine circuit of prayer, we ask for the support of our Creator, and the Creator responds by His unfailing principle of spiritual reflection. Thus, God stretches forth His eternal arms so that the human race arises from the valley of a fragmented life to the pinnacles of a life of glory. Look at the end of this chapter of obsession. Give new nourishment to your mind through study that elevates and devotion to peace. Give new nourishment to your mind through study that elevates, and devotion to peace is the ideal formula to be free from all forms of shackles. In acquiring blessings for the spirit and in spontaneous help to life that surrounds us, we will always reflect this superior life. Therefore, advance from mental blindness to the glorious light of divine wisdom. Why we bring this together? God wants us to prevail. God wants us to be happy. Wants us to live a happy life. Do we have things that we need to work that perhaps we don't like so much in this reincarnation, in the environment that we live? Yes. But we are, as much as now bringing back the tolerance, as much as we are not perfect yet, but we are perfectible beings, so are others. So are the situations around us. And with prayer, again, and this constant work against obsessions, we will get there. Take this as, again, as we mentioned at the beginning of our talk tonight. If we're going through some trouble, read these 3 chapters. Because I haven't seen yet, through the studies of this book, I haven't seen yet 3 chapters that come so well together as an antidote, as a helpful tool for us to get out of our difficulties, get out of our problems in our lives. Because with this idea of tolerance towards ourselves, towards others, the environment, with prayer, and the alertness that He brings us into these contracts that we established, perhaps we have established in the past and the now, that we need to do something about it, we will live better. For sure we'll live better. So I would like to stop here. Thank you for the time, and open up for any questions that you may have, any comments that you may have as well.
Could of struggling linguistically with. Oh, I'm kind of struggling linguistically with obsessor and obsessed, and I'm trying to understand and open my mind to be someone who is obsessed as someone who just can't get their mind off something. They just can't stop doing something. They just feel like they have to repeat it over and over, or be abnormally involved with it. And I'm not familiar with the term obsessor, so obsessor in this light is the person who's trying to get you obsessed on something.
That is, you are on the right path. Well, let me go back. And one of the things that we didn't do is to go deeper into the idea of obsession. But think of this persistence that you just mentioned, but as an influence from one individual towards the other. Okay, so I have my ways of doing things, and I want you to do that way. And I will obsess you, and I will do everything that I can through thought, through actions, right? That you will lead your life that way. And you will become, in a way, imagine as a puppet doing the things that I presented to you, right? And you think it's right. And you think it's right. This is an influence that we try to alert, that we try to work on both sides, okay? Not only for the obsessed individual who comes to us, perhaps they are disturbed, they are in going through a difficult moment. They don't know that it is an obsession, right? When they come here to the center and we try to pray with them, we try to give helpful tools, prayer, for example, but as well as we also pray for that individual who is obsessing, who could be discarnated in the spirit life, or could be, as we were talking here today, giving emphasis today as well, someone who is incarnated too.
How does that affect the parent-child relationship, where the parent feels like there's a way to do it? And
very much so. So the question is, how does this affect the parenthood, right? Parents and children, right? How does this affect us? So how does this affect, thanks for your question, it's okay. How does this affect us? Technically, very much so, with parents actually manipulating their children. You have to be a doctor. The father couldn't be a doctor now, has to put that kid through medical school. The kid finishes medical school, what happens? He's miserable, right? Because he wants to be an engineer, right? He's not one thing, he's not the other, and then there it goes. That's the same thing. And it's the same thing happening with small children as well, that the children, seeing the acts, seeing the thoughts, they do what? They start following the same patterns. And that's why sometimes we think that, oh, the kid is so much like the father or the mother. Right? Who wonders, right? So these are very good questions that you brought, but these are not daily lives. And I think this is very important that she made these questions, because sometimes we think it's something that is happening, that I have to go to the center to. No, it could be right under our eyes. It could be something very small that we started, that now it's acute, obviously, but that we could have treated when it was a small thing, and it can still be something treatable, but we make a big deal about it, and we hide ourselves from it. Anybody else?
Just to complement what that, I heard one story. I don't know who did that. If it was Chico or somebody. Actually, when they start to indoctrinate the obsessor, and which was a spirit, a discarnate spirit. Is this on?
Mm-hmm. It is on.
He said, I am prepared to get out, to go. It's she that didn't want me to go. She's obsessing me, you know. Mm-hmm. She calls me so much. She wants me to be there, bugging. I'm prepared to go. I understood already. So it can be both sides, you know. It starts equal to one way, but one that learns faster may want to get out. Maybe either one. It can be the incarnate or the discarnate, right. I think. But about tolerance, I think it's a difficult thing when it comes. I was thinking about a parent or parents that have kids that are in the wrong direction. Can be in a gang, can be in a drug, as a victim of drug, or can be a dealer, whatever it is. And it's in this bad situation, and the society or other people nearby would say, well, you should have educated way before. Well, it's too late, or the problem presented is different now. The guy is an adult, but still around, making the parents miserable because of the guilt, or not guilt, but worried about, you know. I'm not talking about the illness. I'm talking about something more going towards some kind of gang or something. So what kind of tolerance you're going to expect from this parents in this state of this planet Earth? The way we think about a majority of the society, community, family, think about and will demand from those poor parents, you know. So I feel that the spiritist, but still spiritist is not that in our daily life. The spirit is by putting that we are immortal beings, that we have to give time, maybe not even time for this incarnation, but the following under the incarnation. Because if I think about Jesus as a model, guide and model, I would say when he healed the 10 lepers, how many went really follow his advice and came to be grateful to him?
Very well.
The rest stay, you know, in the wrong direction now,
Right.
because they're, and it was, what was his feeling? Would be the feeling of us as parents that lost 9 kids and only one was saying no.
But there's one difference.
You know, so that's why I think we're not in the situation, the level of Jesus, to understand, well, I see him in 100 incarnation, that he will be an Emmanuel.
Right.
You know?
Very well. I think you answered already. I don't have to say anything else. But there's the difference that, number one, Jesus never stopped working. And he is such a visionary, like many parents nowadays they are, right? When they see the child doing something wrong, when they would make errors. When our parents look at us and say, really? You have to go that way. You have to do this, right? And we do that as parents. We do that in society, right? And we know that there will be a correction at one point, hopefully not as drastic, to get that individual back into place. Think of those 9 lepers 2,000 years after. Where are they now? Think of the impact of receiving from Jesus the ability to see again. For them, it was just the physical eye. But Jesus wanted them to see beyond the physical, right? Beyond the vision that we think of vision. Jesus wanted them to see that it's not just the physical body. It's look beyond, right? Jesus already had that in mind, but they didn't see it. But where are they now? Right? So what do? We keep working, Yasko. We keep working. Because this is what I see with parents sometimes. Again, dealing with the public, and parents, they have to bring, especially mothers, because fathers, they don't, you see now more, but not as often as the mothers. Mothers sometimes, they have one kid over here, and the other is running around, and the other is, you know, she's holding over here because she knows that one that she's holding is really like going to do something crazy. So, but they do it. They go do the errands. They go, you know, get them in the car, out of the car, take them to school, whatever they do, and they're patient. They know that that moment, they perhaps don't verbalize it, don't say it, but they feel it, right? A parent who goes through a tough moment with their kids when they're facing an illness or something, they are visionaries. They're thinking, this is going to pass. That cold, that tough moment, right? They keep working. And this is something that perhaps we can mirror in our lives, right? And keep working. If we say it, people don't listen. If we bring about a group of people to change a situation and that individual, that other group of people won't change, we keep working. We keep giving examples just as Jesus did, as Emmanuel brought to us. He didn't go back and say, Peter, are you going to deny again? He didn't go back to the problems. Let's keep going. There's much work to be done. It's going to be harder now because I may not be here with you, and that probably feeling of guilt, of that Sunday feeling sometimes that we have, and now we have to start the week, right? That they felt, that nostalgic feeling when Jesus had to part, but that actually give them a boost. I learned something really interesting this week from the book Our Daily Bread. Emmanuel again talking about the passage of Christ, right? Jesus dying. If it wasn't for that, if you think of Jesus staying with us past the cross, how our lives would be now. Jesus kept talking about that he had to go. At one point, he would have to go before everything happened. So again, being a visionary again, he knew what could have happened because he also had to respect everybody's wants and wishes for the future. But he knew that at one point, people were going to rebel and get to that point. But imagine if you were to say, no, I'm not going to go through this, or hide, or do whatever the world that perhaps we saw Judas doing and hiding and continue with us. That moment of death, that departure, brought a bunch of good things to the environment, to the people around. We see it today as necessary. But was it necessary for that scandal to happen? Not really, but it helped us. It boosted those individuals who stayed behind. When I read it, I was like, wow, I never thought about that. It's a different way to see Jesus on the cross. It's a different way to see the passage because it brings the best of us. It brings the best of when we have everybody, we take for granted. But when we lose something, guess what? And the same happens, the reason I'm saying this, because the same happens when we go to the wrong direction. And we miss the good examples. And we go back and we say, gosh, I don't think my mother wanted this for me. We already studied the son who left the father, right? Even the prodigal son. Even the pigs my father owned is eating better than I'm eating right now. And he went back. So these examples will never go astray. So I think it's important for us to remind ourselves these three elements in life. Again, tolerance, prayer, and obsession. We have come thus far, and we're very happy to continue and finalize these three last chapters of the book. Perhaps we will extend a little bit more on the idea of love, because it's a very broad topic. But next we will be studying illness, death, and love. So we gave a little hint about the death that we just mentioned here, but it's necessary. Physical body, okay, of the physical body. So it's important for us to see these things. I'm very happy to be sharing this book with you. And I wish, again, as I say over and over and over, that you get your copy, you study, you make your own conclusions, read it, reread it, because as I was going back to seeing, take parts of or study parts of the other chapter, as Emmanuel was mentioned, I was like, oh, I saw this. We studied this. Wow, So it's this quantum element that it just keeps growing. It just keeps growing every time you read it. So read it, share it with one another. It's definitely an opportunity for all of us. So I thank you so much, and we'll see you next month with these 3 last chapters. Thank you. We will actually, Daniel, pray together and